Hello everyone, I'm filming this video in the middle of the day in Australia, but don't worry, I've got shade right here, so as long as I don't step out into the sunlight, I will be safe from final death. Ah, sunlight! Ah, 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 ooh, shade. Whew. I'm safe. I've saved from final death. I'm safe. I am saved from final death. I live again like a phoenix. Oh my. I have thought constantly over the past 7 months and 4 days about what I want to say in this heartfelt message. I wanted to put genuine thought into this because I did not want to rush my heartfelt message out the door like Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines was forced to do from whoever worked at Activision in 2004. I also wanted to see if I felt the same way now as I did right after completing Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines for the first time ever. And I feel the same way. The exact same way. I loved the experience so much that I went on the internet to see if there was any merchandise, and I bought this t-shirt on Etsy from the seller Veritas LDN. I plan to buy this shirt from that seller every time I complete the game, whether it's just the game itself or a mod. That's how much Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines has drawn me into the atmosphere it creates. And that's how much Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines has compelled me to make this video. This heartfelt message is about my experience with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines and why that experience contrasts with how I feel both individually and professionally about the upcoming Bloodlines 2. This video also includes sentiments from others expressing concerns about Bloodlines 2, as well as quotes from articles that may or may not be directly related to Bloodlines 2, but they do relate to it in some way. My heartfelt message will contain spoilers for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. I did not want to include any spoilers at all with this message because Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is something that should be experienced without any spoilers, and I wanted no one to potentially worry about any spoilers, even though I'm talking about my experience. However, the Bloodlines community brings up fantastic points about the depth of roleplay in relation to certain quests and characters, and how that, as well as with the player character, and how that compares to the depth of roleplay for Bloodlines 2. There will be light spoilers for the very beginning of the game, as well as the name of the event that vampires are afraid of. There will be light spoilers for the characters Nox, Mercurio, Vandal, Tongue, and Romero, as well as heavy spoilers for the characters Heather, Paddy, and Boris. There will also be heavy spoilers for the Griffith Park quest, The Enemy of My Enemy, as well as heavy spoilers for one of the endings of the game, which I won't name in this section of the video because this is the spoiler warning section, and the name of the ending somewhat gives away the ending. Most important of all, however, there will be heavy spoilers about the cab driver by mentioning the game's own files that confirmed the theory about him before that theory even started. Aside from all the things I said I will spoil, there will be no spoilers. I have a script here with me while I film this heartfelt message, so that I can ensure to contain the spoilers in this video to exactly what I said I will spoil. So that anyone watching this video who hasn't completed the game yet can still have the experience of discovering a lot of the main plot and story and side quests and the main, the mystery, the main core mystery at the heart of this game, and how that experience is an amazing journey no matter what ending you get, and how any ending is an amazing ending, and how the discovery of every character viewpoint still matters after you discover the answer of what's going on, and how any replays someone might have of the game still matter, and how you can still have a fresh experience when you play the game again. If you don't have the time to watch this whole video, or you don't want to watch this whole video, I hope I've put somewhere, wherever this video has been uploaded to, the different sections, so that you only have to watch the parts of this message that you're interested in watching. However, I hope you have the care and time to listen to my entire heartfelt message, because I believe with all of my soul in everything I'm about to say. I completed my first ever playthrough of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines on the 3rd of March 2025, 12:19, 41 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So exactly 7 months and 4 days ago, at the time of me filming this video. I checked my save files on GOG Galaxy, because that's what I played it and completed it on, for the exact date and time. Well, I checked my save files for the exact date and time down to the second for when I completed the game for the first time ever, because I want to convey how much Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines means to me by cementing the exact moment I completed the magnum opus of Troika games. Before I even started to play Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines for the first time ever, I was aware of its reputation. So much so that when the announcement trailer from Hardsuit Labs for their version of Bloodlines 2 came out, I was excited as if I was a long-time fan. A short time before filming this video, so maybe about a month ago or something like that. But anyway, a short time before filming this video, I also learned that before the Hardsuit Labs announcement trailer that revealed Bloodlines 2 to the world, there was an alternate reality game called Tender that built up to that announcement, and creating an entire alternate reality game that builds up to the sequel announcement shows true appreciation for the fans. Another thing that shows true appreciation for the fans is the dialogue and the delivery of that dialogue in the Hardsuit Labs announcement trailer, especially the last 9 words that are spoken right as the title is revealed. Quote, "This city will bleed you dry. You're young. You'll fight over scraps. Safety is bought with blood. Yours, theirs, ours. Make one mistake and it's over. Here, no one's hands stay clean. You will come to despise it as much as I do. But I've waited so long to see it again." Unquote. Another thing from the Hardsuit Labs version that showed true appreciation for the fans is the content put into the editions Hardsuit Labs had available. The standard edition, of course, came with just the main game, which is great enough on its own, as it was actually following the core elements of the previous Bloodlines game, as well as the core foundational blueprint of the previous Bloodlines game. But if you pre-ordered the standard edition, you would also get the First Blood pre-order pack, which included a Retro Hunter outfit. So an outfit that looks like what hunters from the first game wear. The First Blood pre-order pack also included an engraved pistol weapon skin and a Civil War saber weapon skin. The unsanctioned edition came with everything from the standard edition, including the First Blood pre-order pack, as long as you pre-ordered this edition, along with the unsanctioned Blood pack, which includes in-game commentary, in-game developer commentary, featuring Brian Mitsoda, one of the core writers of the first game and the core writer of the Hardsuit Labs version of Bloodlines 2. An in-game art book, Damsel's Beret, a Smiling Jack outfit, a Jeanette Vorman outfit, the Vorman family portrait, a sarcophagus table, a severed arm weapon skin, a stop sign, and 24 hours early access. The Blood Moon edition came with everything from the standard edition and the unsanctioned edition and the First Blood pre-order pack and 24 hours early access as long as you pre-ordered this edition. Along with a season pass, aptly named Season of the Wolf, which came with a bludgeon weapon skin, Story Pack 1, Story Pack 2, and a story expansion. So, even more story content was already planned after the release of the main game, meaning Brian Mitsoda was expanding upon what he'd already written. Along with the name, Season of the Wolf, there's a descriptor that comes with the Blood Moon edition that hints at what the story expansion, the story packs, and potentially a storyline in the main game might have been about. The descriptor reads, quote, "Get the season pass to go deeper into Seattle's underbelly and meet the vampire's greatest enemy." Unquote. That description for the Season of the Wolf pass, this proves appreciation for the fans because this is yet another reference to something in the first game, that being the Griffith Park quest and encountering a werewolf, something that is tougher than a vampire, especially in this universe. And although I may be a fledgling when it comes to the world of darkness, I am aware that despite playing as a vampire, battling against threats stronger than you is one of the elements, if not the core element, of not only Bloodlines, but Vampire the Masquerade. The collector's edition came with the pre-order pack as long as you pre-ordered it, and 24 hours early access as well. And also included everything from the standard edition, the unsanctioned edition, and the Blood Moon edition, along with a physical steelbook game case, a physical Seattle map poster, a 28 centimeter resin statue of the character Elif, a 7-inch vinyl soundtrack with Rick Schaefer's and Womb Music's audio and soundtracks, with all the music for that game. And the collector's edition also came with a Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition core book PDF, which means that not only was the Hardsuit Labs video game going to be a true sequel, a true successor, a true spiritual sequel, and a true spiritual successor to the original Bloodlines, it was also being used as an opportunity to get more people into the world of darkness by bringing them to the tabletop game that inspired the original Bloodlines, as well as the Hardsuit Labs version of the sequel. I am aware that some Vampire the Masquerade fans don't like the 5th edition, especially when comparing it to the 20th anniversary edition that reflects the original version of the tabletop game and all the content that comes with that 20th anniversary edition and reflects all of the original content. However, it still doesn't change the fact that bringing fans of the Hardsuit Labs version of Bloodlines 2 and fans of the original Bloodlines to the tabletop game that inspired them with any edition of that tabletop game is an amazing customer care strategy, an amazing marketing strategy, and an amazing business strategy for the entire World of Darkness brand. There was also the option to buy the collector's edition content by itself, which works out well if you already have all of the in-game content from the other editions, which you could also buy separately from each other at any point. This shows not only thought and consideration into the game itself, as well as being a sequel to Bloodlines, it also shows thought and consideration for how fans and potential customers might react if they only wanted to buy certain content and wait for the other content to actually release. And shows consideration for fans and potential customers who might have been only able to buy the cheaper editions with fewer content, because it gave them the freedom to buy the other content separately later without being forced to buy the content they already have again with a more expensive edition. This care and consideration is felt by fans and potential customers, even from the cover art alone. A Reddit user named Thick Nasty Tax Fraud made a post on the r/VTMB subreddit titled, "The old cover felt more personal to me." The post shows 2 pictures of the cover art from the Chinese room and 1 picture of the cover art from Hardsuit Labs. There's text that accompanies this Reddit post that reads, quote, "Not saying the new one is bad, but the original cover art had more going on in it. You have a vampire looking down at you, smiling with a body hung from each side of these glowing neon lights as he smiles and offers you a hand. All the while, the rainy cityscape perfectly puts the scene together. I'm pretty new to the series, but still, seeing that old cover art really gave me a haunting/unnerving welcome home vibe. The new one feels almost generic to me. Where the old cover made you question the man's motives, the new one makes it clear this is a threatening vampire. It removes the mystery. I might be overreading it, but I'm new to the series and VTM and didn't see anyone else mention this." Unquote. The comments below this post carry the same sentiment. A Reddit user named Archdurd with the Malkavian clan tag commented, quote, "Another aspect is that the old cover was greeting you, talking to you in a sense, yet with the precarious position and the corpses there, it was, in a sense, a devil tempting you." Unquote. A Reddit user named John Doe Lost with the La Sombra clan tag replies directly to this with, quote, "So true. It was charming, inviting, mysterious, and intriguing, all while also evoking danger. The rain and dark sky is pretty and easy on the eye. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. The current one just ain't it. The red looks a little garish in the new one. It shows a character that ultimately may not represent the one you choose to play in-game, as in appearance-wise at least. And it gives no true hints as to what the game is about other than vampires. I'm not asking anything fun like, oh, why is that guy sitting with 2 dead bodies? Like with the first cover. I just know it's about vampires and that's it." Unquote. The Reddit user Invadius with the La Sombra clan tag replies directly to this with, quote, "I love how the Malkavian gave the most accurate analysis about the old cover. If I may add my own thoughts, it's not just the precarious position. It's also the angle. He is above us, giving his hand to ascend us into that limbo between corpses. Corpses that are hung like prey. Isn't that what vampire is all about? Unquote. The Reddit user, far above, with the Toreador clan tag, comments on the post with, quote, as well as Mr. Damp inviting you in with Seattle as a backdrop, I also love the two lights and two bodies mirroring Bloodlines 2, unquote. The Reddit user NorthAd9005, with no clan tag, comments on the post with, quote, the design and idea of Mr. Damp alone entices you to play the second part, unquote. There's another comment from a deleted Reddit user that reads, quote, the old cover had more personality. The new cover is generic and reminds me of AI-generated vampire wallpapers Playground used to make. The old cover combined with the old trailer felt like a limited edition figurine, while the new cover combined with the new trailer feel like the Buzz Lightyear meme, if that makes sense. The old one looked like it'd shine and get recognized amongst samey games, but the new one would be lost among them, unquote. The positive anticipation I felt for the Hardsuit Labs version of Bloodlines 2 is something I've never experienced before, and the consideration the developers of Hardsuit Labs had for fans, potential customers, and the World of Darkness brand makes it all the more sad that this was cancelled. The Hardsuit Labs gameplay footage and trailers, the alternate reality game, and the role-playing video game from 2004 drips with the best atmosphere I have ever experienced out of any story from any medium of storytelling. Well, if I'm really being completely honest, like just really thinking about this right now, it doesn't just drip with that atmosphere. It flows so much that I'm swimming in it and exploring all of its depths. However, the only one I got to experience, and the only one of those things any of us got to experience, is the video game from 2004. I played Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines on GOG Galaxy and Steam. At first, I started the game but didn't finish it. Then I kept stopping and restarting the game because I worried about how exactly I should experience Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines for the first time ever. At this point, I chose to play the vanilla version for my first ever proper playthrough because I wanted to experience what the game was like at release before any fixes from West 5's unofficial patch. I quit the game, gave myself a break from it so that my first proper playthrough felt fresh. Then I launched the vanilla version by launching the Legacy executable on GOG Galaxy. Some people that have played the vanilla version on GOG Galaxy and Steam have said they've completed the vanilla version without using console commands. I wasn't one of them. I encountered a bug during the tutorial that didn't show the icons for the quick select inventory, which meant I couldn't equip anything else, which meant I couldn't get past the tutorial, which meant I was locked out from the rest of the game. I could have skipped the tutorial with that one dialogue line for the player character while speaking to Jack at the very beginning, but I wanted to play the whole game. I also wanted to relax about using console commands, especially since I've never used console commands for video games before. And I saw on GOG and Steam forums that some people encountered a bug near the end of the vanilla version that makes your save unplayable. I quit the game at this point so that I could give myself some time away from it, so that my first proper playthrough felt fresh. And I launched the normal executable on GOG Galaxy as it natively came with the basic 11.5 version of West 5's unofficial patch. Using the basic 11.5 version of West 5's unofficial patch, I was able to play the game as close to the vanilla release as possible while playing and completing a working version of the game without using console commands. Thanks to the modder West 5, I've had the best experience out of any story released through any medium of artwork and storytelling. Bloodlines... Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is not only the best video game I've ever played, it's also the best experience with any piece of fiction I've ever had. The story and plot, the foreshadowing, the scripting, the structure, the design, the dialogue, the locations, the environments, the art, the characters, the depth of the character creation with naming and designing my character, which has more content depth in the Plus version of West 5's unofficial patch. The progression system, enhancing the way my character leveled up, which in turn influenced my journey throughout the story and plot. The ways in which I could roleplay my character throughout the story. The ways in which my character could interact with other characters. The character reactions to my custom character. The appearances, well, whatever my character said. As well as whatever clan I picked. The animations, the music, the atmosphere where I can just stand around doing literally nothing, not even moving, and still enjoy the game. And everything else I haven't mentioned that's listed in the credits, and everything else that's not listed in the credits, ultimately capped off with the song that plays during the credits. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines isn't just the perfect video game. It's the perfect experience. And the ending to this game, no matter what ending you get, is a perfect end to a perfect journey. All of this makes it all the more sad that Troika Games became defunct. Although they might have sealed their fate by calling themselves Troika Games, because it turns out that Troika is a Russian word that means three of a kind, and Troika Games was founded by three people, had three other words in their logo, those being code art design, and released a total of 3 games over a course of 3 years with 3 different publishers. Those 3 publishers and games being Sierra Online in 2001, publishing the video game Arcanum of Steamworks and Magic Obscura; Atari in 2003, publishing the video game The Temple of Elemental Evil; and Activision in 2004, publishing the video game Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Bloodlines was the last video game of Troika Games. And that's sad because the world lost the most legendary and mythical developer. It also lost more Bloodlines content that Tim Kaine talks about in his YouTube videos, which includes story expansions that essentially act as sequels, making Bloodlines a video game trilogy within the same Gehenna story. There was also a cut multiplayer component based on Counter-Strike, aptly named Counter-Bite. It would have been a joy to see all of these cut expansions and the multiplayer component released into the world officially by Troika Games as more official content for the original Bloodlines would have been fantastic, or rather, fang-tastic. But we'll never see any of it, because the people who worked at Activision in 2004 rushed Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines out the door way before it was actually ready, which meant it was broken on release. Not only that, not only was it forced to release in a broken state, the timing of that forced release could not have been any worse, because it was forced to release 1 week after Halo 2, 1 day before Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, and released on literally the same day as Half-Life 2. Which is ironic, considering that the people at Troika Games asked the people at Valve if they could use the Source engine, which is what was used to develop Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. The timing of all of this led to very few initial release sales and the closure of Troika Games, since no one at Troika Games could find someone to give them funding after this. This is a shame because despite the broken release and despite the very few initial release sales, and despite being a small-scale role-playing game, and despite the two previous Troika Games releases being large-scale role-playing games, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is still talked about as the best role-playing video game of all time to this day. And if Troika Games was still around, we could have had 27 years worth of this studio's legendary and mythical code art and design. However, despite the closure of Troika Games, fans fixed Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Fans still keep the spirit of Troika Games alive to this day because they knew a gem was buried underneath the rubble in 2004, and Bloodlines fans uncovered the best gem in video game history, which led to the polish that gem has now, which led to the best experience I've ever had. Bloodlines fans are the reason anyone was able to work on a sequel in the first place, because they are the ones that kept Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines and the Troika Games spirit alive. So when I hear about the upcoming Bloodlines 2 from the Chinese room and the issues that game has with development, it worries me. Troubles with development for a video game is nothing new, especially with Bloodlines. But when the trouble concerns a video game that's a sequel to one of the best, if not the best role-playing video game of all time, if not the best video game of all time, if not the best story and plot of all time, if not the best experience of all time, that worry is completely justified. Especially when the key writer of the first game is fired from the original version of this project for what seems like no reason at all, and that the original version of this project is scrapped altogether in favor of a new version made by a different studio that's also still using some of the same assets the old studio made to save money. And with the release of their product 2 weeks from now, exactly 2 weeks from now, the current developer and publisher would take credit for some assets and designs that aren't even theirs. That's not only disrespectful to everyone at Hardsuit Labs, it's disrespectful to the fans who want genuine effort put into the sequel. It's disrespectful for any potential customer that wants genuine effort put into this sequel. It's disrespectful to any World of Darkness fan that wants genuine effort put into this sequel. The fans are responsible for maintaining the legacy of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. So they are the ones you should listen to, not just hear, listen to, if you want a sequel to succeed. Because Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is the peak, the pinnacle of the World of Darkness. And I know this because even if you don't know anything else about the World of Darkness and you don't know that anything else about it exists, you know about Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Longtime Bloodlines fans don't like this upcoming version of Bloodlines 2, and one longtime fan named Chris Hayner on the website The Gamer wrote an article that was published on the 30th of August 2025 titled Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 looks nothing like the TTRPG. The article reads, quote, "Like many, I've been waiting years for the release of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. I absolutely love the first game and have been anxious to see what a 2025 version of it would look like. More than that, though, I am a Vampire the Masquerade tabletop RPG player. So believe me when I tell you I have expectations, and thus far, they're not being met. I love RPGs, but there are very particular settings I have almost zero interest in. Dungeons and Dragons is awesome, but most of the time I don't want to go adventuring through a traditional fantasy world. It's just not my style. I also don't enjoy Game of Thrones or The Lord of the Rings, despite how good they may look. When the RPG group I'd fallen in with decided that the next game we were going to tackle was a homebrewed Vampire the Masquerade campaign written by our GM and set in 1980s Chicago, I knew very little about the game. In fact, the only thing I knew was that a WWE wrestler from the 90s was named after one of the VTM clans. Naturally, that led to me picking Gangrel as my clan, building my character, Ronnie, a 20-year-old college student in Chicago, turned against his will into a vampire. Now he runs a vamp-friendly pub in the neighborhood his coterie claimed as their domain. Throughout his vampire adventures with his equally fantastic friends, Ronnie hates his vampirism, falls in love with a human woman, and must protect her and her young son from vampire society. Oh, and he has a pet hawk named Elton. It gets intense. That's the beauty of roleplay, though. While you're playing within a set world, so much of what happens is based on the decisions you make and the ways you form the core of your character. I didn't have any of that planned for Ronnie until a side quest took us to a dream dimension where I was a human falling in love with the same woman I'd meet only days later. I loved playing VTM with my friends, but schedules get a little crazy. People evolve, and slowly the time between sessions gets longer and longer. So at some point, I wanted my VTM fix and gave Bloodlines a shot. And to be fair, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is not a full-fledged adaptation of the TTRPG. Because how could it be? Within role-playing, the story is determined by the choices you make and how the GM rolls with the punches. You can't really do that in a video game. There has to be a finite number of choices, because how can you program it any other way? And yet, the first Bloodlines game managed to resonate with me on a similar level as the TTRPG. I found the setting engrossing, and I appreciated the choices I did make and the character I was able to build. Basically, it felt like a proper CRPG because it was. That's all RPG fans want in video game adaptations. We know the game won't have the endless amounts of imagination that comes from a group of friends sitting around a table and thinking up stories off the cuff. We know studios have to work within parameters to release a completed product. We know studios have to work within parameters to release a completed game. And that's why Bloodlines was ultimately such an exciting game to play, especially as a VTM fan. If only it had been more successful with the mainstream. In 2019, the wait for Bloodlines 2 began, and I got excited. But then the wait kept going and going. Eventually, the game was moved to a different developer, always a good sign, and has seen a slew of delays. Now it's set to come out in October of this year, and I'm wildly concerned. Bloodlines 2 simply isn't Vampire the Masquerade. You might think I'm overreacting, but so much of what makes VTM what it is has been removed. The role-playing elements were largely stripped out. Creating your own vampire hero or villain is gone, though you can unlock certain cosmetics for the player characters. Some of the clans are even paywalled day one, with that looking like it might change thanks to backlash. It's hard to consider this a VTM game, ultimately. When you strip out the pieces that make it an authentic adaptation, as the first Bloodlines was, you're creating something different. So call it something different. Does Paradox Interactive, which bought VTM creator White Wolf in 2015, think releasing a game that fundamentally does not understand the RPG title will appeal to fans? It's hard to imagine that happening, especially when the first video game in the series sold very little and was considered a commercial failure. It's unfortunate because Bloodlines 2 actually looks like fun. I'm sure if it wasn't connected to VTM and instead was just an original tale, I'd be excited about it. Next year's The Blood of Dawnwalker is a good example of an exciting new vampire story created from scratch. I wish Bloodlines 2 had done that. Instead, it's clinging to a franchise that, while beloved by fans, is not a massive community in 2025. So while certain elements from the series have carried over, you do interact with various clans and there is some degree of protecting the Masquerade as a gameplay mechanic. I wish this just wasn't attempting to approximate VTM, unless it was going to be a rather deep RPG title. Of course, it's not the first game in the franchise to feel like an entirely different type of experience. We've seen visual novels, a narrative-driven RPG without combat, and even a free-to-play battle royale under the VTM banner. Why does this game have to be a sequel to Bloodlines? Given the far swing away from what Bloodlines was and the core of VTM as a whole, this game would be better served as its own spin-off of the franchise. As it stands now, though, being labelled Bloodlines 2 is only going to work against it, with fans of the TTRPG and the first Bloodlines. Maybe I'm wrong, and the game will somehow be amazing and a love letter to VTM fans. I just doubt it. But what do I know? I'm just some dork who loves playing a vampire-based TTRPG for far too many hours, unquote. There's a comment below this article from the user Chris, which reads, quote, "Just make it not Bloodlines and we will all be fine. It's a small ask," unquote. There's another article on the CBR website written by Steve Michaels and published on the 16th of March 2025 that carries a similar sentiment to the article I just read. This article is titled, "34 years later, one of the best vampire properties is quietly forgetting what made it great in the first place, and fans are worried." The article reads, quote, "Vampire the Masquerade is a classic tabletop RPG system that has thrilled fans for decades. Set in a noir world of darkness and conspiracy, it allows players to take on the roles of vampires, struggling to survive and hold on to their humanity. The premise has made for some remarkable stories, but unfortunately, video games have often failed to live up to the source material." Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is now a cult classic, but was plagued by a notoriously difficult development and was a commercial flop. Its sequel has been stalled for years, seeing changes in writers and developers. While production appears to be back on track, recent news has many fans worried that the game is missing the point of VTM. Early in development, it was revealed that Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 would feature a player character that was a newly turned vampire. The story would see the protagonist coming to terms with a new nature and adapting to the hidden world of the supernatural. Since changing developers, however, the main character has become an elder vampire. This modification while seeming minor on the surface, hints at a deep misunderstanding about what the franchise is truly about. Vampire the Masquerade has always been a dark setting, concerned with exploring themes like personal horror and existential dread. These feelings are evoked, in large part, by making players feel overwhelmed and powerless. While player characters are usually immortal vampires with supernatural abilities and far stronger than regular humans, they are still comparatively minor actors in a far larger game. They must constantly fight a darkness inside them, referred to as the Beast, that threatens to consume and reduce them to mindless animals. Further, they are always under threat from vampire hunters and other supernatural creatures, like werewolves and wraiths. Most importantly, however, vampires in VTM are always struggling to navigate the complex web of conspiracies woven by others of their own kind. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines featured a protagonist whose sire had been killed, leaving them alone in the world of vampires. A major theme of Bloodlines was that the player is a pawn, being used by competing powers. One of Bloodlines' endings allows the player to simply walk away and reject the system entirely. A fundamental element of Vampire the Masquerade's lore is that all vampires are unwittingly used as pawns by their elders. The oldest vampires, dating back to ancient times, are believed to be secretly fighting with one another, using their descendants to advance their competing agendas. In turn, the older vampires, who are still openly active in the world, do the bidding of the ancients while plotting their own schemes and using younger undead. Thus, all vampire society can be seen as a predatory hierarchy, serving ends that most can't begin to fathom. Players in a VTM game often struggle to simply survive another day while wondering whose agenda they may unwittingly be serving. Small victories, like exposing or thwarting the plans of a local vampire leader, are possible. But the point of the setting is that no one ever uncovers the deeper and darker secrets. Making the main character of Bloodlines 2 an elder would undermine all of this. Elders in Vampire the Masquerade, by definition, have more knowledge, influence, and power in their world. They are far older and possess more supernatural abilities. They have likely sired many other vampires who are loyal to them and orchestrated their own plans for generations. In this setting, they can often be found ruling entire cities or commanding small armies. Further, they rarely take direct action themselves, having learned how to manipulate and use others. Elders are generally important NPCs in a game, giving players quests, or serving as dangerous antagonists. To feature one as the protagonist of a story would tend to reduce the tension players feel. As an elder, players in Bloodlines 2 will regularly outrank those around them socially and politically. While they may not know the recent history of the city they're operating in, having recently awoken from a long slumber, they'll also know far more about their world in general. A main character that is so informed and capable would break with the primary feeling VTM is meant to evoke. While it may work as a traditional RPG power fantasy, it certainly won't work for a vampire narrative. In addition to clashing with the themes of Vampire the Masquerade, making the protagonist an elder could also make it difficult to draw new players into the world. VTM is built in an incredibly complex setting, full of numerous factions and famous individuals, all with their own goals and relationships with one another. Each vampire belongs to a different clan, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. They can also belong to sects, which represent the major political authorities of their society. Each has a history that stretches back to the Middle Ages and is defined by its own ideology, culture, and hierarchy. Vampire the Masquerade features 14 clans and many more bloodlines within clans. In addition to the clans, Vampire the Masquerade also includes 3 major sects that members of different clans can belong to. It has been revealed that only 4 clans will be playable in Bloodlines 2 at launch. While veterans of the tabletop game and longtime fans of the lore will be familiar with these intricacies, many gamers will not. Newcomers would undoubtedly benefit from being able to play a fish out of water character. The fish out of water character is a classic trope that allows the writers The fish out of water character is a classic trope that allows writers to introduce audiences to a new story without awkward, unnatural exposition. A character that, for one reason or another, is a stranger to the setting, can ask questions and learn along with readers, viewers, or players. A newly turned vampire is the perfect example of this in VTM. A person who has just learned of the existence of the supernatural will be entirely ignorant of their nature and the world around them, and need to spend time getting caught up. An elder, on the other hand, already knows everything. Playing through a Vampire the Masquerade game as an elder means many players will know far less than their character, which is likely to break immersion. It will also mean that to teach new players about the world, the game will have to have... It will also mean that to teach new players about the world, the game will have to have characters tell the protagonist things they should already know. This will further undermine the immersion and make for odd dialogue. Players who are new to VTM are likely to be frustrated by the feeling that they're out of step with their in-game avatar, while established fans will be left wondering why everyone wants to tell an elder information that should be old news to them. The original Bloodlines dodged this issue by making the main character, a new vampire, suddenly thrust into the world with little explanation and no preparation. They barely understood what they were, much less how vampire society worked. As such, they were in the same situation as the player, and both were able to learn... As such, they were in the same situation as the player, and both were able to learn over time. Bloodlines 2 seems to be setting itself up for a much more difficult introduction. Okay. Bloodlines 2 seems to be setting itself up for a much more difficult introduction. Many fans have felt for some time that the VTM Bloodlines series is cursed. The first game suffered rushed development and was released in a flawed and buggy state. While fan patches helped salvage the game, it still sold poorly, contributing to the closure of the studio that made it. It took over a decade for another publisher to even start talking about a sequel, and when Bloodlines 2 finally got the green light, it experienced its own long list of production issues. Now, as the game finally appears to be nearing the finish line, recent revelations have many fans worried that it will be another disappointment. Bloodlines 2 may have gotten much more time than its predecessor, and, in terms of visuals, it appears to dramatically surpass the original. In terms of writing, however, it appears that the game is fundamentally misunderstanding the source material. The developer, The Chinese Room, and Paradox Interactive have hinted that Bloodlines 2 will be far more linear than the first game, moving away from the major choices and multiple routes that defined Bloodlines, as well as the classic TTRPG. The number of clans players can choose from when creating their character has also been significantly reduced. Perhaps the most glaring change, however, is the shift to an elder as a protagonist. None of this means Bloodlines 2 is doomed to failure. It's possible to tell a compelling story with an elder as a protagonist, and the Chinese Room may surprise fans and end the Bloodlines curse. Still, this narrative choice suggests that the writers are misunderstanding a basic aspect of the franchise, which does not bode well for the game. Bloodlines 2 may prove to be a solid RPG, but it's unlikely to feel like Vampire the Masquerade. Unquote. The comments below this article carry the same sentiment. The first comment from the user KitKat5335 reads, quote, I am one of those being turned off from the game due to the shift in playable character design. I know quite a bit about White Wolf and their TTRPG source material, and everything this... Hang on, I'll restart that again. The first comment from the user KitKat5335 reads, quote, I am one of those being turned off from the game due to the shift in playable character design. I know quite a bit about White Wolf and their TTRPG source material, and everything about this game is ruining what makes it interesting. Usually, only ignorant players want to be an elder, trying to regain their power and position in the world. However, fans of the TTRPG enjoy the strife of building up from the lower ranks while not destroying what little sense of humanity they have. Coming into their powers, earning a name for themselves in the messed up politics of the story, and, most of all, having a character they can call their own. Not a predetermined one they have little optional choice in. Half the bloodlines aren't even playable, one being Malkavian, which was a hoot in the last game. Sadly, I just see this game being another, like this other game, but using IP of this franchise and hoping the fans don't notice. I get it is hard to fully capture a TTRPG in game form, but this is such a departure you may as well be the plot-armoured NPC the Dungeon Master brought in to form a specific narrative, but isn't important at all. Unquote. The reply directly to this comment from the user Marie reads, quote, I'm pretty over it at this point. If I wanted a linear story, I'd read a book. Unquote. The second comment from the user Nathaniel reads, quote, after reading this article, I no longer have any interest in the game. I've been waiting years for this game just to hear it's going to be a linear story. Unquote. The third comment comes from the user Vevev. Reads, quote, yeah, after all that's been shared since they changed studios, I lost any and all hope for the game. I really didn't like the original vision of a forced Thin Blood start. that's forcing you to diablerize to be a clan vampire due to the law of diablerie, and thus was happy with the change of some things. But as more and more updates were revealed, the removal of Clan Toreador was so heartbreaking for me, I almost quit there. But at least there was Tremere and Ventru. Then they showcased how combat and feeding in it worked. And I quickly began to get... Is annoyed the right word? It's too quick. Way too quick. And pretty much, in my mind, removed the whole danger of feeding in combat. In the tabletop, depending on the edition, you had to spend blood on celerity or have pretty high potence if you wanted to feed faster and drain a combatant in a turn. In the gameplay footage they showed off, regardless of clan, it's just a quick bite and done, even on clans lacking celerity and potence. I hate that, and remember having to get clever with who and where I tried to bite in Bloodlines 1. Then go down the other things listed in this article, and I do not have high hopes for Bloodlines 2. Also, why does the thin blood in our heads talk so much and speak the obvious? It's so annoying, unquote. The fourth comment from the user Stephen reads, quote, "Just hurry up and release it already. It's been delayed 57 times, unquote. The fifth and final comment from the user EverXChosen reads, quote, "You have to have a very compelling character. If you're gonna slot a set character 19 to 20 years later in a sequel, especially with such little clan choices. Most people will always prefer a self-made character that interacts with the world. It feels better to some. On the flip side, characters like Master Chief, Geralt of Rivia, Lara Croft, Commander Shepard, Samus, and so many others are so steeped in character development and lore that we play for them and the world. If the writing is flat, which I'm gonna be honest from that last trailer, it sure as hell is, VTM 2 is gonna put people to sleep. The change also from V20 to V5 is also a borderline radical jump that you've already alienated one of the most consistent game cult classic crowds. So that type of word of mouth is gone. If they were actually wanting a good quality story, they should never have borderline abused Brian Mitsoda the way they did before tossing him away. I hope the final product is as stale as sun-dried toast just from that. Which sucks, because even with V5, you can make fantastic stories. Not as detailed and deep as V20, I'm biased, don't worry, but this should be as easy as peanut butter and jelly. Thanks for coming to my rant, unquote. Paradox Interactive has since put the DLC clans back into the base game, and some people are saying this is a good thing. And while it may appear to be good on the surface, it's actually not. Paradox Interactive is notorious for stripping out already created content and selling it back as DLC. And they've never really budged on that. So the fact that they've reversed their decision means they expect few sales, which also means they are not confident with the product. The only thing that has to be done at this point is to just rename the game to something other than Bloodlines 2. In fact, many people have already created YouTube videos and Reddit posts, and many others have already left comments on those YouTube videos and Reddit posts saying the same thing or something similar. Renaming the game from Bloodlines 2 to something else would fix all problems. Yet, the project still has Bloodlines in the title to draw people in, and that is paradoxically driving people away. Not just the old fans, the new fans as well. If the goal of this project was to bring in new fans, it doesn't work because I'm a new fan. And not only do I hate what I see from a fan perspective, I also hate what I see from a professional perspective, because the Chinese room version of this project is objectively great, but it's not Bloodlines 2. And the Chinese room and Paradox Interactive have ignored fans at every step of the way during development in regards to the role-playing elements taking precedence. However, the game being called Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 is something that was forced by the people working at Paradox Interactive, and the people working at the Chinese room didn't have any control over that decision. It makes me sad that the Chinese room is going to get negative press for something that... It makes me sad that the people working at the Chinese room are going to get negative press for something they have no control over and are forced to do. The name Bloodlines 2 comes with expectations that won't go away no matter what changes are made. And there's one crucial thing that the people at Paradox Interactive have either forgotten, don't know about, or don't care about even though they should. Whenever a video game sequel is announced, people play the previous iterations, or in this case, the only iteration, in anticipation for the sequel. Right now, people are either replaying Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines or playing it for the first time ever. After playing and completing the first game, the people who don't know about the Chinese Rooms video game being a different experience will play Bloodlines 2 expecting the core experience to be the same as the first game, and when they find out it isn't, they will be shocked, then refund their purchase of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 for that reason. Fans of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, as well as any gamer who likes role-playing video games, expect a deep experience. While someone might not have the choice of a tabletop role-playing game, they expect to be able to truly role-play with what they can do and what they can say. When it comes to dialogue, players need to have the impression that what they say might actually have unforeseen consequences beyond the immediate ones. There's a post on the r/VTMB subreddit by the Reddit user Champion of Baiting titled, "Yeah, I think I'm gonna skip VTMB 2. The post shows an image of two pictures side by side that compare the dialogue in Bloodlines to the dialogue in Bloodlines 2. The Bloodlines dialogue options offer genuine choices that lead to genuinely different character reactions and outcomes. These dialogue options are also exactly what your player character says, and with a silent protagonist that allows the player to fill in that voice and speak those dialogue lines the way they want with whatever custom character they create. The Bloodlines 2 dialogue options are essentially the same vague option no matter what you pick, and are spoken by a voiced protagonist that is a pre-made character with a pre-made backstory, and therefore there's no true customization, roleplay, or genuine consideration of the consequences. From the post's Bloodlines 1 example picture, an NPC says, "Psycho bitch brought me here, hit me in the head, and locked me up. What the fuck? I mean, who the fuck does that?" These dialogue options are how the custom player character can respond. 1. She's sorry. This is actually very therapeutic for her. 2. Well, only because you tried to rape her. At least that's what she'll tell the cops. 3. Get out of here. You don't mention what happened here to anyone. 4. I'm sorry, I should have never left her alone. My apologies. From the post's Bloodlines 2 example picture, the character Lou says, "Do try and play along, darling. It's so boring otherwise. Let's try again. Who are you really?" These dialogue options that indicate actions rather than dialogue are how the pre-made player character Fire can respond. 1. Tell her everything. 2. Reveal the mark. 3. Assert your status. Below the Reddit post is a comment and replies to that comment that expand on the point about the depth of roleplay and the consideration of the consequences beyond the immediate ones. The comment created by the Reddit user Little Shurry reads, quote, "Is it me or are all the choices the same? Lamau, really? Tell her everything, will reveal everything. Reveal the mark, will still tell everything. Assert your status, will reveal the mark, which will tell everything in a violent way. Where's the role play in dialogue though?" Unquote. The first reply to this comment comes from the Reddit user Ciaran, which reads, quote, "Like most replies say, it's about the result rather than what you do. 1. Lou will trust you or find you easy to manipulate. 2. Lou will get the message, but will stay neutral. 3. Lou will dislike you, but also fear you and know her place." But those conclusions are just mine after a lot of thinking, and still may not be accurate to the actual result. A game should not make you choose the least confusing option, but the one you prefer. It looks like we'll be reloading this game far more often after a failed dialogue than a failed fight, simply because we do not know what fire will say. Another thing with this approach is I cannot believe TCR actually managed to pull this off. They made concepts of lying and deception a mere illusion or non-existent phenomenon in an RPG. Sometimes we are nice to people, but we're not having nice intentions. Get it? We sometimes say nice things to someone only to backstab them 5 seconds later. In BL1, I tell nice things to Boris, pretending to offer my services, only to kill him silently and alone without his bodyguard around. I cannot do this here. This game literally spills out Fire's intention in a dialogue rather than what she says or pretends to say. Or in reverse, what I always do in BL1 with Heather. I ghoul her up, but then immediately tell her to fuck off, like a dickhead. But in truth, I am ultimately saving her life in the Sabat joint raid. I am saying awful things to her for her own good. In this game, I cannot do this, because I know if I choose to say bad things, those bad things will mean bad thing to the conversant, and they will hate me. Even if I am lying to help them in my soul. Unquote. The Reddit user, Merslater, replies directly to this with, quote, "You can keep Heather as a ghoul and still save her life. Tell her to stay inside when she says she's being followed." Unquote. The Reddit user Ciaran replies directly to this with, quote, "Yeah, but I'd rather spare her life." I'll say that again. Oh, hang on. Oh. Okay, I'll start again. Okay. The Reddit user Ciaran replies directly to that with, quote, "Yeah, but I'd rather spare her from the life of a ghoul or worse, a vampire. You can clearly see she's ruining her life for us with every moment, being a progressively addicted crackhead desperate for us. There is no romance here, no love, no friendship. Just addiction to blood and slavery. I always do the right thing by helping her, but then do the better thing and let her go. I always consider what becomes of her later than what happens now. If I let her go, I may be risking another Patty, but it's a risk I'm willing to take over the chance of her deciding to piece her life together without this vampire BS. My consolation in this case is that after we dismiss her, nothing happens. Nobody mentions a crazy redhead looking for us. We don't see her in the Sabat joint, so I can assume she went over it and lives a happy ever after. It's the same old line, ghouls are just trouble. But to me, it's in a sense, you should have just a human helper and never try to pass your curse to anyone else, because you know firsthand how much this existence sucks, pun intended." Unquote. The Reddit user Mer Slater replies directly to that reply with, quote, pardon me, not that. The Reddit user Mer Slater replies directly to that reply with, quote, "Understandable. For me, I always make her a ghoul and keep her. I saved her life and she wants to repay me. This is all new to me too, and it's an experience I can share and talk about with someone I know that isn't trying to kill me, command me, or manipulate me just for asking a question. I can go out and spend the day doing crappy things for my various masters, and then come home and chill with someone who doesn't really want anything from me. Is it real? Maybe, maybe not. This is just as new to her too. But she's hooked on our relationship, and I don't have to worry about going out and accidentally killing random person on the street number 14 because I, the player, do actually care about what happens to her, and am always careful when feeding. I feel protective and want to keep her safe. It's a mutual dependency. And I always imagined that after being hooked on the high of my bite, she'd spend the rest of her life chasing that high with drugs or booze or people who wouldn't care about her and protect her, and would end up somewhere awful or dead within a year. Or that she'd end up in a psych ward talking about the people who live in the shadows until the day she died. Highly medicated by people who didn't believe a word she said. Unquote. There's another Reddit post in the r/VTMB subreddit that expands on this further from the Reddit user Sam I Am Bad at Dota, titled, "Hot Take, kicking Heather out is less moral than letting her stay." The post reads, quote, "I'm sure everyone who's played VTMB already had their experience with the whole Heather dilemma. The standard view of her arc is this: either you let her stay and she ruins her life, trying to please you, or you do the humane thing and kick her out because you're a danger to her. If you didn't play with the patch, you don't get an option to save her life without kicking her out. As a lot of people seem to think, her getting killed by the Sabbat is your punishment for endangering her by pulling her innocent self into your underworld of terror. As the fable goes, if you love something, set it free, right? As I believe, this is not quite right, as I'm going to attempt to justify when including the option to tell her to stay indoors in the UP unofficial patch. The morality scale of the three outcomes goes like this. Tell her to stay inside. Don't tell her to stay inside. Tell her to leave. The crux of my argument is that kicking her out has a lot of consequences. The crux of my argument is that kicking her out has a lot of consequences that players just aren't considering. It isn't as simple as letting a bird go free into the wild. Oh, pardon me again. Point 1. Her blood dependency. As I'm sure you've done... Point 1. Her blood dependency. As I'm sure you've done the Anarch ending at least once, you would be very familiar with the quest Skelter gives you when you come to downtown. Get rid of Patty. She's a threat to the Masquerade. She's a ghoul with enough awareness to know the context she exists in, and she's going through withdrawal. She's asking around for her vampire sugar daddy, and it's only a matter of time until she breaches the Masquerade. And if you are one of those players who didn't spec into Persuasion, you know how this quest ends. You kill her. Heather, you told her she was a ghoul. You told her you were a vampire and that your blood healed her. By kicking her out, you're sending her off into the unknown, knowing that she's dependent on your blood. Your blood, which you're in absolutely no shortage of, given the amount of feeding opportunities in this violent, unsupervised part of LA. You made her an addict. You're her supply, and you're kicking her out. What's to say she doesn't end up like Patty? A Masquerade violation. What's to say she doesn't end up like Patty? A Masquerade violation that gets unceremoniously splattered by some other Anarch/Cammy muscle. At least Patty had the excuse that her regnant Kent was actually dead. You don't get that. You knowingly created a masquerade violation in waiting, endangering kindred as a whole. And this isn't even getting into the other aspects of vitae in humans that doesn't get as much attention in VTMB. If you didn't play the tabletop, you wouldn't know that ghouls become stronger than normal humans. They're capable of frenzies. The vitae can be detected inside them. If Heather walks into werewolf territory, a wolfie might smell her and consider her marked by the worm and rip her apart. A hunter might decide to take her out as part of their holy crusade. Worst case scenario, she might become a quasi-vampire hunter herself, like many independent ghouls do, staking unlucky neonates to harvest their blood and fuel her addiction. Point 2. Her background. As she tells you herself, her parents are dead, and she has no one special in LA. When you meet her in that emergency room, she was going to die. She had no one at all. Not even the doctor. There's a good reason you get a humanity point. There's a good reason you get a humanity point for saving her here, especially since you may have no idea about the mind-altering properties of vitae. So, what's going to happen if you do kick her out later? Her life was practically in tatters, and you provided stability, and she found a purpose in you. Without that, what's she to do? This is where people bring in the blood bonds artificial love thing in, but this is not the whole story. The blood bond isn't just total mind control. Here's what the V20 rulebook says. A thrall who is treated well and fed often will likely fall even more deeply in love, while a thrall who is degraded and humiliated may find resentment and anger eating away at the bond. Heather isn't a mindless slave. Both pre- and post-ghoulification, she had her own goals and motivations. She acts independently of you all the time and understands what you are and what you need. Her sin here is not her losing herself to please you. It's a lack of guidance and a misunderstanding of what appropriate ghoul behavior is. Perhaps even more enlightening, though, is what is under the first drink section of the V20 rulebook. First drink. The drinker begins to experience intermittent but strong feelings about the vampire. She may dream of him or find herself, coincidentally, frequenting places where he might show up. There is no mechanical effect at this stage. The takeaway from this? Her emotions and actions are not all supernatural. Some of it is genuine on her part because of her background of being alone and ignored. The reason the relationship isn't equal, unlike Nox and Tongue, is because you don't really tell her shit. Instead of developing her into a capable retainer, you kick her ass out because it's risky. Which leads me to the next and final point. Point 3. Who is going to be responsible for her safety now? A lot of players seem to think Heather gets killed by the Sabbat because they're targeting you and are trying to get at you by killing your kitten. Is that really what's happening though? What's the evidence for that? This is the Sabbat we're talking about, and Heather is a defenseless young lady who goes for walks at night by herself. That's prime material for feeding or for turning into a shovelhead, an eyeless blood doll, or even furniture material for a nearby Shemitzi. Hell, this isn't even talking about the violent mortals that inhabit this place, like the gang members who get into shootouts right outside Club Confession. Remember how Heather brings you a human to drain? She tells you this is because he was bothering her. What if that guy was a bit more pushy and a bit more violent? One of her late game dialogues is the most illuminating in this regard, where she talks about being stalked. Tell me, honestly, if you were harboring some kind of teenage runaway and she told you she was being stalked, would you really decide it was best to kick her out? She has no one and nothing to protect her, aside from you. You're not the one being targeted by these stalkers. She is. You are the only one who can look out for her. You're the only one who's strong enough to tussle with the supernaturals who want her dead. By telling her to disappear, you're not saving her. You're shirking your responsibility. Unquote. The comments to this post expand on this further. The first comment comes from a deleted Reddit user, which reads, quote, "An interesting read, though, and I hope this doesn't make me seem like a pedantic ass, I will point out 2 things. One is that she asks someone to call her grandma. I can't remember if she specifically says, but it's implied, therefore, that she lives with her grandma as her parents are dead. Also, she's attending college, I think studying photography or art. It's been a little while since I've played. So I wouldn't say her life is exactly in tatters, besides her dead parents." Unquote. Replying to this is the original Reddit poster, Sam I Am Bad at Dota, with, quote, "This is true, though it is a bit up in the air as to how significant these things are because of the lack of information. It could be that her grandma is her last living relative, and that her college major is just her blind attempt at doing something with herself, like many people who go to college without a plan seem to. From the stance of a shrewder, more experienced in jihad type of kindred, Heather is practically a ghoul jackpot. She has very few mortal connections, is eager to please, and is very unassuming. It would be pretty difficult for hunters to nail down a vampire with someone like that as their ghoul retainer. Unquote. Replying to this is the same deleted Reddit user with, quote, "That is very true, and a good point about her being a ghoul jackpot, especially given I don't believe she ever mentions friends. So it's likely her only mortal connection is her grandma. Ultimately, I do agree with you about letting her stay, particularly as without metagaming, you don't know she'll die. Yes, she's in danger, but as you say, the city is a rough place, so she's in danger anyway. Like the guy who won't leave her alone. And at least if she's with you, then you can protect her." Unquote. There's another comment below this article by the Reddit user A Big Bottle of Water that reads, quote, "You should heal her, then turn her away with no explanation when she shows up. Keeping someone around dosed up and addicted on magic date rape blood is fucked up. Send her home to grandma and have her quit after one dose. She's studying at college. She's studying at a college and probably is making friends there. Life goes on even if you don't have a lot at the moment. Throwing everything away to get high with dangerous people probably isn't a good idea, and encouraging someone else to do it isn't moral." Unquote. The original Reddit poster Sam I Am Bad at Doter replies to this comment with, quote, "I would say that doing that is probably the most risk-free and least complicated resolution. It does run counter to the evidence the game presents to you, though. Aside from Heather, there are 4 total ghouls in the game: Mercurio, Nox, Vandal, Romero. Of them, 3 of them are independently competent and happy with their station. The outlier is Vandal, who complains quite bitterly about his regnant. With them as your reference, you could easily come to the conclusion that being a ghoul is beneficial, and that ghouls are more or less emotionally free." I do think it's interesting the way you think about Heather's mortal life. I think most people lean towards the idea that it would be more moral to let her live I do think it's interesting the way you think. Apologies. I do think it's interesting the way you think about Heather's mortal life. I think most people lean towards the idea that it would be more moral to let her live it rather than have a new one with you, despite the fact that you're an increasingly powerful 8th gen with an ever-growing amount of money and physical and metaphorical power. This is even in the face of evidence that her life is, while not outright bad, at least not that great. What if it were bad, though? What if by no one special, she means she's horribly alone? It would certainly explain why she's so quick to latch on, unquote. Replying to this is the Reddit user A Big Bottle of Water with, quote, I'd wager it's an addict saying what needs to be said to get their fix. But we really never do. Apologies again. Replying to this is the Reddit user A Big Bottle of Water with, quote, I'd wager it's an addict saying what needs to be said to get their fix. But we never do really find out, though. So I suppose we'll have to take their word for it. And with Mercurio and the others, we don't know about the people they left behind to become part of the Masquerade. But Romero lives in a graveyard. Nox is riding the buzz of blood when we meet him, and Mercurio is bleeding out on a couch. Ghouls are basically trafficking victims. And on top of that, imagine... Pardon me again. And on top of that, imagine poor Heather's grandma, who not only lost her child and her step whichever, now loses her granddaughter. And we don't know who the others have left behind when they became part of the Masquerade. But since they stop aging, they likely have to leave their families or risk breaking the Masquerade, unquote. Replying to this is the original Reddit poster Sam I Am Bad at Doter with, quote, The addict angle is interesting to think about when you consider what kinds of people end up as addicts. People with malfunctioning or non-existent support networks tend to be hit by addiction significantly harder. This is why most people tend to bounce back pretty well after they've taken morphine at a hospital, and why people who are struggling tend to have seemingly self-sabotaging drug habits. What kind of life would Heather have been leading if she fell down the rabbit hole so fast and so hard? For the established ghouls, Mercurio and Vandal have criminal pasts, so whatever pre-Masquerade lives they had likely weren't particularly wholesome. Nox is still a bounty hunter. It isn't necessarily the case that ghouls have to give up their mortal lives. The source books detail things like ghouls still having their human families and whatnot. And the mortal cover of a ghoul is one of their greatest assets sometimes. You could liken it to an affair rather than them killing off their old self, unquote. This whole discussion about the moral perspectives of saving Heather's life, then choosing to either keep her or let her go, clearly shows the deep thought that players can have about Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines based on dialogue alone. Whereas that is not felt with Bloodlines 2, as the public pre-release footage of the Chinese room version of Bloodlines 2 shows the dialogue in that game is not truly representative of real choice and just spells things out for people, leaving no nuance and no chance for any true, meaningful discussion among people that play it. Also, going back to expand on the comment that talked about the removal of the concepts of lying and deception, the Chinese Room YouTube channel has a YouTube short titled Bloodlines 2 Dialogue System. In this video, there's in-game notifications that appear after choosing one of the dialogue options, indicating exactly how that character felt by the dialogue action that you chose. This shows that not only has the Chinese Room version of Bloodlines 2 interfered with roleplay by removing the concept of lying and deception from the player character, it has also removed the concept of roleplay of lying and deception from the player, because the NPCs you talk to after selecting a dialogue option give you an in-game notification about how they reacted to a dialogue choice you made. On top of that, the game gives you these notifications about a character's reaction, even when it is obvious how they reacted because of their face and what they say. You know exactly how a character will react, as this game makes it obvious what impact you are having on the characters at every point, which means a player will have an easier time figuring out whether or not an NPC is actually an ally or enemy, which works against the game's central premise of discovering the mystery of what's going on. There's an article I discovered on the PC Gamer website that expands on this further. It was written by Harvey Randall and published on the 19th of August 2025. The article is titled, "We Can't Keep Making Video Game Stories for Players Who Aren't Paying Attention to Them." The subtitle to this article reads, "Let me get lost. I promise it's okay." The article reads, quote, "I've noticed a trend, particularly in some recent RPGs, of, well, let's call it Netflixiness. Dialogue designed to leave absolutely nothing to interpretation, to exposit information in the most direct way possible, devoid of any real character or context. There's an assumption that any moment the audience spends confused, curious, or out of the loop is a narrative disaster." I hate to keep knocking Dragon Age the Veilguard about, especially since I still had a decent time with it all told, But the thing that made me break off from it after 60 hours really was its story. It's a tale that does get slightly better, but it gave me a terrible first impression I never quite shook. Given the game's troubled development history, and the fact that some of its writers have produced perfectly fine work before, Mord and Solus for crying out loud, I'm led to believe this pattern comes from the top. Well, I have a hunch. When Varric says, "That ritual is going to tear down the veil, the only thing separating us from the Fade and an endless number of demons," to Rook, his mission partner, who should know all of this already, I can't help but think of one thing. Second screen viewing. In this excellent article in the International Journal of Communication, Daphne Rena Ideas recounts a time where an interviewee... my God. Apologies. In this excellent article in the International Journal of Communication, Daphne Rena Ideas recounts a time where an interviewee told her that Netflix had insisted, "What you need to know about your audience here is that they will watch the show, perhaps on their mobile phone or on a second or third screen, while doing something else and talking to their friends. So you need to both show and tell. You need to say much more than you would normally say." Now, Harvey, one might say, that makes absolutely no sense. Video games, with some exceptions in genre like Idlers, aren't played as second screen activities. To which I would reply, you're exactly right. But since when has that stopped executives from chasing trends against common sense before? These are the people who thought Veilguard still should have been a live service game. After everything. This is conjecture, but I don't think it's out of pocket to assume some of these companies are chasing the narrative successes of streaming services, or that in doing so, their big bosses might adopt all sorts of wisdom designed for making media meant to be consumed, not enjoyed. After all, in these second screen shows, nothing is left up to chance. If your audience gets lost, it's bad. If your audience gets confused, it's bad. Bad stories are confusing. Good stories are understood. I know these things because I've looked at other good popular stories. The Veilguard follows in this trend because it's a game that's terrified of audiences getting lost at any point. As fellow PCG writer Lauren Morton put it, it's desperate to chew my food for me. And whether the problem lies with big movers and shakers at EA, or their selected testing audiences, it doesn't matter because we're shooting ourselves in the foot here. Video games are enjoyed in a ton of different ways. Some are even designed for you to tap out of the story entirely, or to only engage with it as an option. And this is fine. But you cannot, as EA did, reach for other audiences on the assumption that the nerds will like whatever you give them. Some players will skip every cutscene, glaze over every dialogue entry, and hammer their skip button till the face button's worn out. And I have no qualm with these people. They simply value a different set of things from me. We can coexist. It's the design assumption that we must be met in the middle that's messing us up. For this player, a story that's impossible to ignore will barely register for them. If anything, it might backfire, making them feel coddled or pushed into situations they don't care about. And for me, dialogue that's written for people who aren't paying attention makes my brain want to crawl out of my skull and autonomously go do anything else. Here's the thing. Good writing advice says to show, not tell, not because everything must be shown as soon as it comes up lest the audience be lost, but because it's inherently more interesting to give us the pieces we need to draw conclusions. Crucially, you don't always have to actually give people information. Confusion isn't a fail state. Not having the answers immediately isn't a disaster. It's okay to let a question mark float above. It's okay to let a question mark float above your player's head, or to trust they'll get the gist from context clues. We can tell the ritual Varric and Rook are trying to stop is dangerous because they're trying to stop it. I promise. I feel like there's this phantom assumed viewer who, without a full set of narrative cards in their hand, will throw their controller and immediately do something else. And that makes me sad because it assumes your players aren't curious, that they don't want to have questions answered. Oh, apologies again. I feel like there's this phantom assumed viewer who, without a full set of narrative cards in their hand, will throw their controller and immediately do something else. And that makes me sad because it assumes your players aren't curious, that they don't want to have questions, or aren't interested in seeing where something leads. Some aren't, sure, but if you design video game stories for them, you rob from your most invested players the simple pleasures. Analysing the story, looking deeper into scenes, discussing it with each other online. And as someone who watched Final Fantasy XIV reached a fever pitch of over-explaining during Dawn Trail, that stings, let me tell you. I'm sick of seeing games with an air of corporate weight sitting on top of them. I'm tired of watching a scene and going, yep, that probably tested well with audiences. I'm exhausted by this pervasive idea that writers are to be resented, or that I have the memory of a goldfish. I do, but that's besides the point. I want to get a little lost. I want to have to think about what a scene I just watched meant. I want to see where your story goes rather than be told where it's headed. We simply cannot keep making video games for people who aren't paying attention, because it won't change anything for them and it's making the rest of us bloody miserable. Unquote. The Chinese room might be able to play to their strengths, but the title Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 for a video game that doesn't follow the same core blueprint as the previous iteration will kill it. Paradox Interactive needs to change the name. If physical copies have already gone to retailers, those physical copies need to be recalled. I know the Chinese room can make great games, and I am willing to purchase and even pre-order this game, even perhaps the most expensive edition, but not if it has the name Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. And the name must be changed before the initial public release, because waiting until after the initial public release will be far too late for many people. I might still be willing to buy the game if the name is changed at that point, but only when all the content is included, including the pre-order content. And even then, I might not. More likely not, because of everything that's happened. If this project keeps the name Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, the only way for Paradox Interactive to somewhat make any money from it is to put it as a tax write-off. Otherwise, change the name, and the game will not only sell like hotcakes, there will be less people refunding it after release, as the name change would reflect that the project is more linear, as fans of Bloodlines expect the same non-linear elements the first game has. So there should be a title that reflects the change of core elements, so that the game can sell well. There's a post on the r/VTMB subreddit from the Reddit user 33 Sharpies that shows people want true roleplay out of a sequel to Bloodlines. The post is titled, "My most desired feature in a future VTMB sequel." It has a picture of the character sheet. Apologies. There's a post on the r/VTMB subreddit from the Reddit user 33 Sharpies that shows people want true roleplay out of a sequel to Bloodlines. The post is titled, "My most desired feature in a future VTMB sequel." The post has a picture of the character sheet menu from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines and a picture of the character sheet from the Vampire the Masquerade tabletop game. And the Reddit post is accompanied with the text character sheet. And the Reddit post is accompanied with the text character sheets and the freedom to roleplay. Oh, pardon me again. Below this post is a comment from the Reddit user Eternally Catboy that reads, quote, "The important thing isn't just having a character sheet, but passing the entire project through said sheet." In BL1, You can't even shoot straight if you create a character without skill in firearms. But it's not just the combat. Every environment and quest the game creates is built around the combat and non-combat skills you pick. You solve problems depending on whether you can put people to sleep or use stealth. You can lockpick or hack computers. You can kill people or pass dialogue checks in a number of ways. I personally hope for future WOD CRPGs built around that sort of logic. Unquote. There's another comment under this same Reddit post from the Reddit user Janice Prospero that reads, quote, "When game franchises discard stat sheets, they typically don't return. VTMB 1 was heavily inspired by Deus Ex and System Shock 2, and both of those games had follow-ups that got rid of stat sheets and never brought them back. System Shock 2 introduced stats like strength, endurance, agility, and cyber affinity. Your choice of these skills dictated the kind of character you could play. Then BioShock, which is System Shock but underwater, just threw it all out. Then BioShock 2 and BioShock Infinite never returned them. Prey 2017, which was explicitly a spiritual successor to System Shock 2, shifts everything to neuromods. They do resemble skills in some ways because they have tiers that increase their power and versatility. But the traditional System Shock 2 character stats never returned. Deus Ex Invisible War discarded the skills from Deus Ex. So no weapon skills, no hacking skills, no lockpicking skills, no swimming skills, nothing. And it never returned in the sequels, Deus Ex Human Revolution and Deus Ex Mankind Divided. The only thing resembling a traditional skill that Human Revolution has is hacking having tiers. Everything else is equivalent to VTMB 2's disciplines. There's a strong correlation between games leaning into immersive sim-like design inclinations and discarding stat sheets. I think that stat sheets are seen as a legacy abstraction. The game world reacting in a consistent and immersive way is undermined if you are able to put points into a stealth skill that makes enemies increasingly unable to see you. But having an unlockable power called, for example, Cloak of Shadows, that does the same thing is seen as immersive and consistent. Unquote. There's a reply to that Reddit comment from the Reddit user, apologies again. There's a reply to that Reddit comment from the Reddit user Satef that reads, quote, "Didn't VTMB get based on VTMR? In Redemption, They already worked with character stats and dots to fill into the disciplines. It always felt like a natural progression towards the TTRPG, unquote. This discussion about the crucial elements for a game with Bloodlines in the title proves why Paradox Interactive needs to change the name of the upcoming game developed by the Chinese Room from Bloodlines 2 to something else. There's another reason why the name should be changed. And why some people at the Chinese Room might feel nervous about their own developed product. Where the Chinese Room truly shines is with their original creations. This is something that these developers excel at. However, they already have an example of developing a sequel project to an intellectual property they didn't create. That turned out to be worse than the original and almost killed the franchise. That sequel is Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs, which one Amnesia fan described as having the essential Amnesia elements removed and being turned into a walking simulator. I wish I could find the fan's name or username again so I could give them the proper credit for this statement, especially since so many potential customers of Bloodlines 2 that were able to play the game before the initial public release are saying the same thing. That it has the essential elements removed and that it feels like you're walking down a linear corridor. There's also another example of a sequel that had disregard for the original in terms of including... pardon me. There's also another example of a sequel that had disregard for the original in terms of including what people expect for depth of roleplay that would have benefited from not being titled as a direct sequel. That video game is Dragon Age 2, and the other problem with that game is, well, I think as I was already saying, you couldn't really create your own character. Well, that was the other problem. The fact that you, no true roleplay elements, really, maybe some, but no true customization of, the actual character. You might have been able to customize some aspects of your character, but the character itself was pre-made and the story, the backstory already predetermined, which means that the game should have been named in a way that indicates it wasn't actually directly related. Sorry, I mean, it should have been named in such a way that indicates it's not directly related. Raphael Colantonio the former Arcane Studios CEO and director, talked about creating Project Danielle and how being forced to name that video game Prey was a mistake. In the announcement and controversy section on the Wikipedia page about the 2017 video game titled Prey, there's a paragraph that reads, quote, Colantonio said in later interviews that calling their game Prey was a non-negotiable compromise with Bethesda, a decision that no one on the Arcane team was happy with. Oh, I gotta start that again. Apologies. Quote, Colantonio said in later interviews that calling their game Prey was a non-negotiable compromise with Bethesda, a decision that no one on the Arcane team was pleased with. Colantonio described the naming decision as gross and disrespectful to both his team and the creators of the original game. He stated that it felt like a kick in the face to the developers of the original game, Human Head Studios, and that he wished to apologize to them. The creative team at Arcane reportedly wanted their game to stand on its own as a unique IP, but were overruled by corporate decisions at Bethesda. Colantonio said it felt bad to lie that they were continuing the Prey series. He expressed that it was a sales mistake that would turn away fans of the original Prey and fail to attract other players. Colantonio left Arcane Studios shortly after Prey's release, citing creative disagreements as one of his reasons for departing, unquote. Raphael Colantonio had every right... Apologies. Raphael Colantonio had every right to worry about being forced to disrespect original fans, because not only is that a nasty thing to be forced to do, his worries ended up being completely justified, as despite gaining some amount of money on release, those sales went down within 2 weeks and the game was considered a flop. It experienced low sales due to poor marketing and a misleading title that made fans of the original Prey think it was related. And it wasn't until years after Arcane Austin closed that the game was considered an underrated masterpiece. The game is objectively great, but what killed it was the name, which is the same sentiment that people share and say about Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. Doing your own thing works for original projects, but not for an intellectual property that's already established. Listening to fans, like really listening to them about the integrity, truly listening to fans about keeping the integrity of the core elements is essential to the success of any intellectual property. These issues are exactly why people prefer the Hardsuit Labs version over the version from the Chinese room. The developers at Hardsuit Labs might have had trouble but at least they were willing to deliver the core elements of what people expect from a Bloodlines game. Back before the first delay of the version from the Chinese room, extended gameplay was released of that version, and nowhere did it list any descriptor of being in any pre-alpha or post-alpha state, which it was apparently confirmed to be, but this confirmation can't be true because the game was meant to release shortly after the public release of this extended gameplay footage, which coincides with no build descriptor in the video. Even after the delays, people are still mentioning the problems that this game from the Chinese room has. And when apathy is the only thing that customers feel towards your product, it's already dead before it comes out. You can save a project potential customers care about. You can even save a project potential customers hate, because at least it is getting attention. You can't save something that is treated like it doesn't exist. It also doesn't help that the creative director of this project said that naming the project Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 was what the people at the Chinese room were asked to do. Although it's clear at this point that the people at the Chinese room weren't asked, but forced to name their game this title by the people at Paradox Interactive. All of these things have not just myself, but all of us wondering what happened to Bloodlines 2, including Chris Avellone. Chris Avellone, on the website named Medium, talks about the development of the Hardsuit Labs version in an article released on the 17th of July 2021 titled, "What the Fuck Happened to Bloodlines 2?" The article reads, quote, "So since I made a statement about what happened last year, I've been getting a lot of questions that have nothing to do with it. Thanks for the empathy, assholes. But I'll help you anyway. One of the common questions is, what happened to Bloodlines 2? I'm paraphrasing since they're not usually that polite or brief. It's also usually the only question, well, beyond who would win in a fight between Darth Revan and Darth Nihilus. Spoiler, Revan always wins. For those not in the know, Bloodlines 2 is a sequel to a Vampire Bloodlines developed by Troika Games and published by Activision in 2004. It has a big cult following, and mods are still being developed for it to this day. West5 especially, bless his modding soul." And then it's got a quote, then it's got a picture of that. That's the picture that comes from the article, which I don't know if it came out good on this printed paper, but just seeing that included in this article is awesome. Like with the original Jeanette model and the original Ming Jiao model and the original, what I believe is the original male Malkavian player character design. Anyway, continuing on with Chris Avellone's article. I know a lot of the developers who worked on the original, and they have their own stories to share, but those stories won't surprise anyone in the industry. Still, they did an incredible job. It's one of those games you remember. In our industry, you can't ask for much more than that. It's the highest compliment to have your game talked about years, if not decades later. Bloodlines was one of those games. Now, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 was the sequel around 16 years later. Paradox Interactive was the publisher. They haven't done any RPG games themselves, to my knowledge. Yet, I guess. However, apologies. However, what some people may be unaware of, Paradox did not approach the actual developer Hardsuit Labs. Hardsuit Labs, who also haven't done RPGs to my knowledge, were the ones who pitched the project to Paradox. Apologies again. What a double birth. The whole pitch went so dandy, the two of them went into business together, and Paradox even went so far as to acquire a significant percentage of Hardsuit Labs. This is public knowledge. A little about Hardsuit Labs. I'll let their website speak for itself. And then it's got something from the Hardsuit Labs website that reads, quote, Workplace and culture. Hardsuit Labs was founded in 2015 with the same goal as every other game development studio that has ever existed: to make great games. It takes talented, driven people to make great games. Here at the lab, we work hard to create and to maintain an environment that not only attracts those people and keeps them here, but that allows them to thrive and to do what they do best: make great games. It's not always as easy as it sounds, but it really is that. It's not always as easy as it sounds, but it really is that simple. What sets us apart is the way we make that happen. It's all about our people. Unquote. And now continuing on with Chris Avellone's article. So, the Bloodlines 2 pitch. I know all about this process, not just because it's public knowledge, but because I was there for the pitch meeting. The pitch meeting happened in Las Vegas. I almost forgot. Apologies again. Apologies again. The pitch meeting happened in Las Vegas. I almost forgot why it was in Vegas, but then I remembered it's also where the DICE convention happens every year when there isn't a pandemic. If you're not familiar with DICE, you're not missing much. As one described it, it's where game executives go to jerk each other off, pretend to facilitate contracts, give awards to themselves, and compliment each other on the hard work the developers at their studios do. The biz dev guys go there to feed on these same executives and devour them slowly from within like humanoid parasites from the movie The Bay. It's all part of the vampiric theme. So Paradox and Hardsuit were in Las Vegas for DICE. We, being schleps, went there without going to DICE because we are not executives. I went because I wanted to help Hardsuit with the pitch. I had been working for Hardsuit. I went because I wanted to help Hardsuit with the pitch. I had been working with Hardsuit for some time prior on the title. And to encourage the Paradox folks, the pitch was a good idea because I knew the Paradox folks from years before. This encouragement was very selfish of me, and in retrospect of all that was going to happen, probably kind of shitty. Yes, selfish. Yes, shitty. Still, it wasn't hard to rationalize. It had been so many years since the original, I wanted someone to do it. And I thought Bloodlines fans, including me, had waited long enough. I was mostly thinking of myself though, because, surprise, I wanted to work on it in any capacity. Now that Paradox had secured the vampire license, it seemed like it could finally happen if we could just convince them to do it. Interestingly, Hardsuit didn't even get a third of the way through the PowerPoint pitch before we stopped it and just started to chat with Paradox about the project more informally to get them more engaged with the idea. PowerPoints are easy to zone out to. Paradox did get engaged. They agreed, put pen to paper, blah, blah, blah. To fill you in on what I did on the project, since most people think I was booted from it last year, along with everyone else, this news is attributed to some poorly worded public statements from the usual round of idiots that got passed through a filter held by an idiot and poured into an idiot glass and then passed out to the public and marketed as a refreshing new mineral water that will ultimately pass through your bladder and into your toilet. Thanks for that, idiots. You could have just said, contract was over. To explain my contract, I worked on Bloodlines 2 for almost 2.5 years, from 2016 to mid-2018. Then my contract came to an end. They didn't use anything I wrote during that time, which was a number of major characters and side missions. Check my LinkedIn. This made me sad, but it's not my choice. The whole experience was like the last 5 minutes of Barton Fink, not the beach scene, the scene before it, Know It All, but stretched out over 2.5 years. Even if I had known all that work was useless, I'd have written anyway, even though it's part of your life you don't get back. So you can't really dwell on it too much. I've been on projects where a lot more got thrown away, as Bloodlines 2 proved for almost everyone on it in the end, apparently. So what happened after? Why did the staff change? Why did it move to another developer? Did it actually move to a developer? Or is that bullshit? To all of you asking, I have no fucking idea. I'm still catching up myself as I've been out of the loop so long on social outlets, but here's what I can say. Nobody I worked with in the trenches is still there, and I have never asked them what happened. It all sounded painful. Not only did I not know why they were fired, were let go, quit, or whatever, but I respect their right to speak for themselves, and they have, although in a limited capacity. I do think they were classy and respectful in their responses. It's also litigious and unpleasant for those who get the boot. It's also litigious and unpleasant for those who get the boot if you're not classy, respectful, and brief to the point of non-explaining. So don't blame them if you think they should have said more. They can't. And if they did, none of you would go to bat for them against the howling mob of lawyers bursting through the walls. Also, even if you know the reasons why someone else was fired, you can't really say them. But what most people don't know is even the company won't say. Oh, apologies. Also, even if you know the reasons why someone else was fired, you can't really say them. But what most people don't know is even the company won't say why they are really firing you, which may surprise you, unless you're in management, and then you're probably whispering to yourself right now, going, oh yeah, that's the way to do it. That's because managers know that saying next to nothing while you're firing someone is the best policy. Why? I'm glad you asked. The reason why a company won't say why they are firing X or Y person, because one, they've often written their employment contracts so they don't ever have to give a reason, called a firing at will contract, and two, giving the poor schlep more information on why they're getting fired puts them, the company, at risk. And most contracts are set up so the company does not have to give diddly squat when it comes to reasons before showing these people the door. It sucks, but it's the reality. Gotta protect the... It sucks, but it's the reality. Gotta protect the good old executive row from being too clear as to why they're giving out pink slips. Was I disappointed at the news of the project getting shut down? Fuck yes. It was the sequel to one of the best RPGs of all time with one of the original writers for the first game. The first game is a cult classic. It's awesome. The characters and voice acting, which Brian Mitsoda had a large part in, and so did Woo Music's directors and audio, are first rate. To be clear, me and Brian Mitsoda don't get along. This is because he is way too tall, and I hate his fingerless gloves. He probably hates me because I am short and I do not wear gloves that aren't made from human skin. Despite our height differences and choice of gloves, however, I have a lot of respect for him. He is the first person to use Filth Maven to describe a monster on the unreleased Torn RPG, all the way back at Black Isle Studios. Yes, he worked there too, do your research. And I still can't get that fucking description out of my head. Thanks, Brian, you filth maven. When I finally found out Brian Mitsoda was fired, quite suddenly it seems, my reaction was, what the everlasting fuck? One of the best, if not the best, qualities of Bloodlines 1 was the writing. It's not even up for debate. If you want to debate it, good luck to you in your future endeavours, but be prepared to lose. A lot. Then I read deeper and got to the part about Mitsoda being used for marketing and how that takes a physical and mental toll. Boy, did I understand. See, this may come as a shock, but writers don't usually get into writing, and especially writing for games, because, gee, they like being in front of the public and mouthing marketing catchphrases. It fucking sucks. It also fucking sucks to prop someone up, have them advertise your game is the real deal, and then yank the rug out at the end. It's not just shitty to the person you're doing it to, it's shitty to the players who have been listening to the hype all this time. It makes it seem like you don't know what the fuck you're doing. But that's just my opinion. I have no insights on the project I can share. No one I worked with in the trenches still works at Hardsuit Labs. Even more interestingly, the Paradox producers I used to work with aren't at Paradox anymore either. I haven't asked them what happened, but if they ever reach out, boy am I listening. But it's probably telling people on both sides of the ocean quit, or were let go, or were whatevered. I suspect Brian was brought on to give more validity to the project's success and perception. Rick puts it better by using the word soul below. Brian was instrumental in the pitch. To be clear, Brian was brought on before I was, and both he and the creative director reached out to me. The director, in his own words, was triggered by a quote in my Twitter timeline that made him think it was a possibility. I now have no idea if that ended up being good or bad. I always advocated that if you did a sequel, you should try and bring on the original staff, especially the writers, because keeping the tone of the first game is good and it's real easy to mess up with brand new staff or brand new developers. That's my suspicions about Brian. Me? I suspect I was brought on because I gave the project RPG validity, which the critics who hate me most should have a field day with, and I agree, even I'm laughing as I write this. Since Hardsuit Labs hadn't done an RPG before, they're mostly known for shooters, which isn't the best fit for a game like Bloodlines since, well, the franchise isn't really about guns. I'd like to think I helped during the pitch, but that's for others to judge. Paradox certainly signed the damn thing, and I didn't even have to blow anyone this time. After the signing, it was like a chorus of angels, or a distant howling of a werewolf pack during their monthly moonlit night of fucking. I thought it was a dream come true to be able to work on it. Who wouldn't? I'm still happy I got the chance, even if the project seems to be somewhere now, I'm not sure where. Don't take that as a negative. Like most, I genuinely have no idea what's going on with it, where it is, or if it's still breathing. Vampire-inspired projects probably don't breathe anyway. I should mention, a lot of people aren't aware of this, but aside from the hard work of the original team, the modding community, yes, West 5, you again, it's also important to recognise that a good part of what made the characters in Bloodlines 1 great wasn't just the art, writing, and animation. It's also the voice casting and voice director. A lot of people don't see or appreciate what a good voice director does, but trust me, they are a big part of what makes crappy dialogue, I'm referring to mine especially, sing. And suddenly, those... apologies. A lot of people don't see or appreciate what a good voice director does, but trust me, they are a big part of what makes crappy dialogue, I'm referring to mine especially, sing. And suddenly, those lines you wrote hopped up on coffee don't seem so bad. That means I was also very excited about the fact that womb music was brought on board. Apologies. That means I was also very excited about the fact that womb music was brought on board to do the music and voice direction for Bloodlines 2. And they're excellent at what they do. Not everyone knows this, but Rick Schaefer from Womb did an AMA on Reddit where he talks about Bloodlines 2. And there's quotes you don't want to miss. I agree with a lot of them, but if I were to sum up one of the most important posts related to what I've been jabbering on about, it's this. And then it's got a quote from Rick Schaefer that reads, quote, "Thank you for the compliment. VTMB was such an inspiring game to work on. I can't really talk about VTMB 2, but I will say that Brian Mitsoda leaving was devastating. He was the soul of the project." Unquote. And then it continues on with Chris Avellone's article. If you can take the time, pop in, check out the thread, and if you feel the same, give some upvotes. The thread is worth reading. Note that I have never met Rick in person, and we don't work together, and we don't have a romantic relationship, which probably comes as a relief to his wife. No idea what's next for Bloodlines 2, but if they're not using Mitsoda's work, I don't really know what to expect. It feels like a huge waste, frankly. It sucks for the people who worked on it, it sucks for Hardsuit, it sucks for Paradox. So, what's happening with Bloodlines 2? Answer, I have no fucking idea. Thank you, Bloodlines fans. I hope that useless answer serves to answer all your useless questions from now until the end of time. My Bloodlines 2 work was one of the many work perspectives and insights I didn't include on my original post on events from last year and the subsequent truth of the events in the accuser's own words, but I wanted to put this particular bloodsucker to bed, or coffin, whatever. Thanks for reading. In the meantime, I'll be waiting for Bloodlines 2 like the rest of you. Unquote. Chris Avellone clearly cares about Bloodlines, the Bloodlines fans, the World of Darkness fans, his work on Bloodlines 2, and clearly cares about the others that worked on both Bloodlines and the Hardsuit Labs version of Bloodlines 2. That kind of care, passion, and soul for maintaining the core of what Bloodlines is meant to be is what you need when creating a video game that is a direct sequel to Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Having respect for the original code, art, and design is the only true way to honour the legacy of Tim Kaine, Jason Anderson, Leonard Boyarsky, the entire Troika Games staff, and the Troika Games spirit. It's the only true way to honour Woo Music and Rick Schaefer. It's the only true way to honour Bloodlines and Brian Mitsoda. It's the only true way to honour the fans that dedicated and still dedicate their lives to fixing and creating modding experiences for the first game so that everyone got a chance to play any potential sequel in the first place. On Tim Kaine's apologies. On Tim Kaine's YouTube video titled A Chat with Leonard Boyarsky Part 2, Tim and Leonard start talking about Bloodlines at around the 1 hour, 1 minute and 50-second mark. Leonard mentioned that in the video, Leonard mentioned that Jason Anderson was the creative director for Bloodlines and responsible for making it feel like a vampire game. Leonard also mentions that Jason worked with Rick Schaefer on the music. So Rick and Leonard should be brought on board and have their work used in a public release version of Bloodlines 2, so that the musical atmosphere this game needs can thrive to become what fans want, to the point that all of that music will envelop and engulf them in the world of Bloodlines 2, and the whole atmosphere will keep them there in the atmosphere of Bloodlines 2, like the first game did. Leonard also mentions that Jason was going to be the game director for Bloodlines 1 and lead the project before Leonard Boyarsky filled that role, to take the responsibility for everything that role entailed away from Jason and to help him deal with Activision. That action alone speaks to how great of a man Leonard Boyarsky is. Leonard and apologies. Leonard and Jason, along with Chad Moore, came up with the main story for Bloodlines, but were told by White Wolf that they couldn't use Kane. Then 2 months after this, they were told by White Wolf... Sorry, apologies. Leonard and Jason, along with Chad Moore, came up with the main story for Bloodlines, but were told by White Wolf they couldn't use Kane. Then 2 months later, they were told White Wolf was doing the Gehenna story and that they could use what they wanted, which gave birth to the hybrid script of the original story with the story of Gehenna mixed in, which is what we all got. Leonard also mentions that Brian Mitsoda did a lot of writing on the game, as if that wasn't already obvious enough, especially with him being listed at the top of the design, dialogue, and story section of the credits. Having Brian Mitsoda and Jason Anderson... Having Brian Mitsoda, Jason Anderson, Len Boyarsky, and Chad Moore write a Bloodlines 2 story and plot is what's needed for fans and potential customers to actually engage with a story that's presented as a direct sequel. Also, since it's the month of Halloween, I should mention the parts of the writing of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines with real tension and horror. The scariest and most tense part of the game, because of how well it is written and designed, is, of course, the sewer levels. I am reminded of the sewer areas and the sewer levels every day because I have a goddamn sewer grate in my backyard. I actually didn't mind the sewer levels, and in fact, I actually enjoyed them. But I can definitely see why even some Bloodlines fans didn't like them, because the real problem wasn't actually the sewer levels. It was the fact that, with the exception of one sewer level during one part of that level, they were designed in such a way where there was only one playstyle to get through them, and they didn't allow for multiple playstyles and routes that took advantage of the player's character sheet, and therefore the players who didn't want to fight, and or those players who would have died if they did, had to rush through them or use some mod that skips those levels entirely. If fans of Bloodlines are willing to criticize something in Bloodlines, they'll definitely be willing to criticize the negative aspects of Bloodlines 2, which at the moment is a lot. The real scariest and most tense part of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, because of how well it's written and designed, is of course the Ocean House Hotel quest. There are parts of the game that stick out to me as being more tense because of the implications for everything going on in the main story. And in terms of horror, the abandoned hospital scared me more, and the sewer areas, not the sewer levels that are part of the main story, but the sewer areas had an eerie atmosphere because of the music. However, I definitely agree the best mixture of horror, tension, and eeriness all in one, as well as being the most phenomenally written quest of the entire game, is the Ocean House Hotel quest. There's also an article about the Ocean House Hotel quest that was written by Joshua Wallens and published on the PC Gamer website on the 29th of May, 2025. The article is titled, "Former BioWare lead writer says the best level in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines gave him ammunition to argue that story can be just as engaging as combat." The subtitle for that article reads, "Especially spooky stories." The article reads, quote, "You ever get sick of trash mob fights? I admit it. Sometimes I just want to run from A to B without massacring half a village, cutting down group after group of bandits, goblins, and imps who have only really been placed there to stop me from getting bored. I am apparently joined in this philosophy by David Gator. I am apparently joined in this philosophy by David Gator, former BioWare lead writer and creator of the Dragon Age setting, who apparently spent a fair bit of time at the studio trying to stop people sprinkling those kinds of things everywhere. Even better, the game he used to support his point was none other than Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines." Speaking to PCGN, Gator recalled Bloodlines' Ocean House Hotel level, a regular spookathon that emotionally scarred me at the tender age of 15 or so. "There's a whole plot that takes place in a haunted hotel," said Gator, "where unlike... There's a whole plot that takes place in a haunted hotel," said Gator, "where unlike the rest of the game, there's no actual combat, but it's tense from beginning to end." Apparently, Ocean House sunk its claws pretty deep at the studio, to the extent that it was all anybody on the BioWare team could talk about for a good while. That level gave Gator some ammunition to push back on demands for more combat. Whenever the level designers would be like, "We have to sprinkle some popcorn fights everywhere because players get bored," I was like, "No, they don't. That doesn't need to be a thing." Not that it always worked. During his time on Dragon Age Inquisition, Gator recalls wanting its Val Royeaux Masquerade Ball to be totally combat-free. "I just couldn't convince everybody. So you kept having to duck out of the masquerade, go have a fight, then come back into it." To be fair, I've been to parties like that. Players need to be kept interested, absolutely, concedes Gator, but adds that he thinks it's always underestimated that part of that can be story. Politics can keep people interested. What the player doesn't need to do is just fight, even if it's an RPG. Frankly, I agree. When I look back on the stuff that's truly gripped me in RPGs over the years, the nameless bandit fights tend not to rank. Unquote. All of this shows that story and plot is important. All of this shows that writing is important. All of this shows that tension, real, true tension, is important. And now that I'm thinking about it, or more accurately because this script reminded me, the real scariest part of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is the dinosaur. If you know, you know. Going back to an earlier point about the talk between Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky, there's another thing about the writing that is probably the most important point that Leonard mentions. Jason Anderson knows the lore inside and out. So Jason Anderson is the perfect individual to be the creative director for a Bloodlines 2 that people actually want. Like he was with the first game. It would be fantastic to have the creative director of the original, who also knows the lore inside and out, to be the creative director for the sequel. There is something I should mention about the writing of Bloodlines and the lore of the World of Darkness before I continue. That cab driver that everyone suspects to be Kaine is definitely Kaine. Tim Kaine said that White Wolf disagreed with this initially, but then later agreed with the Gehenna book. Also, Tim Kaine mentions that, in the sound files for the cab driver, like in the sound files themselves for the cab driver, the character has the name Kaine. On IMDb, the voice actor for the cab driver, among the other characters he voiced, doesn't have cab driver listed. He has one of his voice characters in the game listed as Kaine. So it's not just a strong theory. It was actually confirmed before the theory itself even started. No amount of retconning changes this. The only thing the retconning has done is disrespect the original Bloodlines, the Gehenna book, and everything attached to the Gehenna story around the time that all released. It's sad that Leonard Boyarsky focuses too much on the troubles that happened to him during development, because he does not know how special Leonard Boyarsky does not know how special this game is to those that have played it. A comment on Tim Kaine's YouTube video from the YouTuber DJ North 2020 reads, quote, "Passion bleeds through. It must be hell on earth to crunch with a deadline. But the games are so memorable, like that old comic book you've had for ages, but it's missing a few pages, or there's a stain from a previous owner. It's still magic." Unquote. A comment from the YouTuber Nathan Longhair reads, quote, "Leonard, if you knew how much VTMB means to me and almost everyone I've shown it to / talked to about it. It's an amazing game, warts and all. Yeah, it's buggy, and some things are undercooked, but even so, what we got lasts. Sometimes real beauty comes from pain. I recall Schaefer talking about what a dark place he was in when he made the music for it, and it is wonderful for that game and has never left me. I don't want that to happen, for people to be miserable making games I enjoy. But at least I hope you can take satisfaction that you did create something truly unique that resonates with a lot of people, even today, 20 years later." Unquote. A comment from the YouTuber Cofelio01 reads, quote, "I'm so sorry to hear what a nightmare the development of Vampire was for all involved. That said, to this day, it's still one of my absolute favourite games. In fact, it's fair to say that the game had a real impact on my life. When it first came out, I was still living in Europe. But about 2 years later, I moved to LA, where I've been ever since. Let me tell you, Vampire captures the essence of LA at night like nothing else does. No documentary, no movie, nothing. Hollywood Boulevard or downtown, they don't look exactly like they do in the game, particularly they're not quite as empty, but they really feel like that. Amazing. On my first day in LA, my new boss took me out to lunch to a really nice restaurant somewhere on a hill overlooking the city. At some point, he started to point out the different areas to me. That over there is Hollywood, that over there is the Valley, that over there is Griffith Park. Here I interrupted him. "Oh, Griffith Park, I once killed a werewolf there." I'll never forget the look he gave me, and it's still funny to me. Turns out, in the long run, we didn't get along very well. Should have seen that coming. Unquote. On Tim Kane's YouTube video titled "Proposed Expansions to Vampire Bloodlines," the YouTuber Iji Sakura leaves the final quoted comment that Tim Kane gave a heart reaction to. The comment reads, quote, "Bloodlines, despite its faults, has firmly remained one of my favourite games, top 3, since I first played it. It's a game I never uninstall. I play it once a year, and I never find myself growing tired of it. The design, the writing, Rick Schafer's perfect original score, coupled with the fantastic choices in licensed music, it all culminates into this absolutely perfect early to mid 2000s Gothic vibe. The fact that more was planned is an incredibly bittersweet thing for me. I'm glad that Troika had plans to give more love to the World of Darkness. And at the same time, I find myself even more upset that the industry has lost Troika games. Even beyond Vampire, we were also given Arcanum, which remains one of the absolute top tier RPGs of its era, in my opinion, and is something that to this day I would do horrible, horrible things to get a proper TTRPG system for. And of course, the Temple of Elemental Evil, one I still need to play, but I've heard many good things about. I really wish Paradox would be more willing to go ahead with games in the World of Darkness setting. But after the recent years of management changes, the opening up of the IP to other developers and publishers, and the fact that as a publisher they seem more focused on their grand strategy titles, I'm sadly not going to hold my breath for a Bloodlines 2. All I can hope is that others will take the reins and give the setting the modern, depth-filled RPG it deserves. But call it rose-tinted goggles or perhaps rose-tinted spectacles for our Tremere friends. I highly doubt anything will ever quite capture the same unique feeling Troika brought us with Bloodlines. Thank you for these videos, Tim, and thank you for the work you've done in helping realize the projects you have over the years. The RPG scene wouldn't be the same without you and those you've worked with. Unquote. This comment shows how people feel about Bloodlines and why it's important to truly respect what fans and potential customers want for a game with Bloodlines in the title. Bethesda, with the 2017 video game Prey, proved that naming a game something it's not leads to its death, no matter how objectively great it may be. Larian Studios, with Baldur's Gate 3, proved that it is possible to create a sequel that includes the variation a new audience expects while honouring the fans by including the same core elements and blueprint that are expected for a direct sequel to Baldur's Gate 2. Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines 2 needs to be cancelled indefinitely and put as a tax write-off if the Chinese Room and Paradox Interactive hope to salvage any sort of financial benefit. If this doesn't happen, the project needs to be renamed from Bloodlines 2 to something else, or have the Hardsuit Labs version released with fans modding that version, because not even West 5 wants to mod the version of Bloodlines 2 from the Chinese room. Or the project could be given to the people at Larian Studios to develop the things fans of Bloodlines expect, and have all the people I've mentioned that worked on Bloodlines work on a version of Bloodlines 2 that people actually want. This will bring in more money than you can possibly imagine, and I know this because Baldur's Gate 3 is a large-scale RPG, and Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is a small-scale RPG, and if the people at Larian Studios made Baldur's Gate 3, they can definitely make what fans and potential customers expect for a video game titled Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. It's likely that none of these things will happen because of the money that Paradox Interactive has already put into this project. However, these possibilities are what fans of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, fans of the World of Darkness, and potential customers prefer, so that they can feel confident in this product to the point of pre-ordering the most expensive edition before release. At least these possibilities are what I would prefer, so that I can feel confident about this product, because as it stands, this product isn't just turning me away from any potential sequel to Bloodlines. It's turning me away from the World of Darkness. Even with all of the 5th edition rulebooks for all World of Darkness properties available for a fantastic value at the moment because of a Spooktober Humble Bundle, I would much rather buy the 20th anniversary edition of Vampire the Masquerade that isn't included in that Humble Bundle at all, so that my first ever experience with the tabletop role-playing game is the best it can be. However, even then, I still don't want to buy that 20th anniversary edition or anything related to the 20th anniversary edition or anything to do with the tabletop game, because Paradox Interactive owns White Wolf, which means that any money spent on any World of Darkness product goes toward the publisher of the Chinese room version of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. And I'm not going to financially support a company that will ignore their own potential customers for this product, telling them that the best way to get the most money out of them is to remove Bloodlines 2 from the title and replace it with literally anything else. I remember seeing a short on the It's Me JP YouTube channel of someone mentioning that the name could be changed to Vampire the Masquerade the Nomad. Perhaps the name of the project could be changed to a title I've thought of. Vampire the Masquerade Fire from the Ashes. That title plays upon the name fire and fits the theme of the fire element and the theme of coming back to life resurrected like a phoenix, while also tying into the theme of potentially seeing the city burn. Fans of Bloodlines, fans of the World of Darkness, potential customers, and I will be okay with this product if the name is changed from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 to something else entirely, or just doesn't have Bloodlines in the title. Then the title Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 can be used for a different game in the future, perhaps developed and even published or co-published by my dream studio, Larian Studios, working with my dream team of staff from the original Bloodlines, working to save Brian Mitsoda's original Bloodlines 2 story from final death, and releasing that project to all of us. With all of my soul, I definitely want to see that become a reality. In Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, just before the end game, the cab driver guides the player character through a crossroads choice of which potential ending to choose. And now, the people at Paradox Interactive have a crossroads choice to make that will impact what ending they receive for their product, as well as the consequences for the World of Darkness brand, as well as whether I delve further into the World of Darkness property or just abandon it forever, aside from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Please make the right choice for the World of Darkness. Please make the right choice for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2.